Hey y'all! Hi, I'm going to be building myself a little eyeshadow palette today. This is what's left of the eyeshadow palette that I built last time. I've been moving my singles around and playing with them as I am wont to do. So as you can see, it's already partially dismantled. I'm going to be finishing the job, putting these away, cleaning this up, and then starting over again with new inspiration. I like to look at palettes that are new to the market, that maybe I'm tempted to buy, or that I know that I'm not going to buy, but I'm attracted to them for one reason or another. Look at them and use them for inspiration when I'm building my own palettes. So today I'm going to be looking at the Natasha Denona Retro Eyeshadow Palette. It's a beautiful palette, but it has too many mauves for me. So I'm going to be looking at the more neutral shades in that palette. And I've also found myself drawn to images of Charlotte Tilbury's new palette. It's called Smoky Eyes Are Forever. And there are a lot of things I like about it. It has a black in it and a brown. It has some iridescent shades and some really pretty neutrals. So I'm basically going to be making my own palette that's a hybrid of those two palettes, taking what I love about each of them and leaving behind what I don't, to form something that I like better than either of them and that I don't have to spend any money to use. If this is your first time to my channel, then welcome. I'm so glad you're here. I'm Hannah. I love beautiful things. I really love eyeshadow, but I know that there's a danger of buying too much of it because it takes a really long time to use up. So when I'm tempted to buy something new, I like to reroute that temptation, that focus onto what I already own. And if that sounds good to you, I hope you'll subscribe. Now let's go ahead and get into the meat of this video. Y'all, I just filmed the entire introduction and I realized that I forgot to put my rings on. I always like to wear rings for this kind of video, but I'm actually kind of glad because this incredibly beautiful ring box was just sent to me in the mail by my subscriber Jess, who just started her own Etsy shop selling antique and vintage jewelry. She sent me this unbelievably beautiful box and this gorgeous opal ring. She also sent this ring carved out of jade, which is really cool. I've been enjoying wearing them both. I will link her Instagram account down below and the Etsy shop, Jewels Gems Estate. She's following her dream by starting this shop, and I'm really proud of her. Okay, we're bejeweled. We're ready to go. Let's get this baby cleaned up. Okay, I think I might want to use this small palette today instead of this really big one. I loved the palette that I had here, and I made so many looks from it, and they were really different from each other, many of them. Like one was very smoky purple, some of them were more neutral bronze, some were more yellow gold, some were super iridescent and wet look. It was just amazing. But the thing about the inspiration that I'm looking at today, the Natasha Denona Retro Eyeshadow Palette and Charlotte Tilbury Smoky Eyes Are Forever, the thing about it is that I want to condense those two palettes into one, not just combine them, but condense them and only take the elements that I really love, the things that I would truly use from each one of those palettes. So I'm actually looking to make a pretty edited palette that might not look like either of those, but will give me what each one of those two bigger palettes would be giving me. But you know what? I don't have to decide now. I'm going to go ahead and start picking shadows, and then I'll edit down my selection, and hopefully it will fit into this palette. But I guess I did want to let you guys know and solidify it in my own mind that this is what I'm aiming at. Okay, here's the initial group of shadows. I'll go back and pull more if I feel like the palette isn't coming together. But actually, there's one thing that I do want to add in before I proceed, and here's why. I'm looking at this group and I'm looking at the two pictures up on my computer screen right in front of me. And this looks a lot like Charlotte Tilbury Smoky Eyes Are Forever, and it doesn't look at all like Natasha Denona Retro. Like, it doesn't look like Retro was an influence. I know that it's an influence in terms of like these sort of like plummy taupes, smoky plummy taupes, which is what I like the most in the Retro palette. So if I'm really sticking to my brief of just pulling the shades that I think I'd get the most use out of in the Retro palette, then yeah, I have completed the brief. But for the sake of the video and just for the sake of cohesion in this project, I would like my palette to look like the Retro palette and Smoky Eyes Are Forever had a baby. And right now it doesn't look like they had a baby. If they did have a baby, then my palette received all of the genes from Smoky Eyes Are Forever and doesn't look at all like its other parent, Retro. So I think I need to pull something that's distinctively Natasha Denona Retro that doesn't appear in Smoky Eyes Are Forever. And I know what I want it to be. I want it to be one of those like wine colored shimmers that's a little bit richer than mauve. I just don't want it to lean too mauve overall. So I'm going to try to pull at least a shimmer and maybe a matte in that rich wine color. Okay, this looks a little bit more like the love child of those two palettes, but you know, a little tiny version. It looks like I'd be able to fit the whole thing into this, but I don't think I actually can. I don't think that the shades will all fit, but let's see how it goes. Maybe though, maybe. No, I'm not going to be able to fit them all. But it's okay because there are some near dupes here. I think I need to edit a little bit. This black shade is like putting soot everywhere. Okay, these are the two that are popping out at me. Well, let's group them all together. So there are a bunch of this, a bunch of this. There's a bunch of this kind of thing. There are two of this kind of thing. In theory, there's sort of multiples of this kind of thing. And this is kind of that kind of thing. So we probably don't need all of this. This shade is from a Depotted Juvia's Place palette. And this is a Colourpop single named Milli. They look so similar in the pan, but they are actually not the same in some key ways. Looks like the Juvia's Place one is much shinier, and Milli is darker. I think I like Milli. I like that more red, even like a salmony undertone coming through, whereas the Juvia's Place one's more of a straight copper. The inspiration for this comes from one of the shades in Smoky Eyes Are Forever. There's a really pretty rich kind of ruddy copper in that palette. That's one of the things that I'm drawn to. So I wanted to have something like that in there. And then these are basically the thing, they represent the thing that I love the most about the Natasha Denona Retro palette. This shade is from the Lila palette, and these two are singles from Adept. I like the darkness and sootiness of the one from the Lila palette, but I think that I'll find one of the other two more useful. I think it's got to be that center shade. I just love that taupey. It's like it would be mauve-ish if you weren't looking at it next to a more mauve shade. This is a maybe. This is a yes. And this I think we can say is a no. Because anything that I would use this for, I'm just going to use the black or the brown. And speaking of the black and the brown, I'm definitely going to include this brown. I'm definitely going to include this really deep, velvety matte wine. I think I'm going to keep this matte in too. That's the kind of matte that appears in both of these inspo palettes, and that's the kind of thing that I do like to use when I'm using a matte. So then we have all of these shimmers left, and I might actually not need to choose among them. Actually, there are 15 shadows here, and I want to get it down to 14 because that'll be 7 and 7, 2 rows. Or do I want 5, 5, and 5? Although if Opal from JD Glow is one of them, then they might not all fit. Is that going to be okay with me? I mean, it's still a very beautiful palette. It will still end up being a very beautiful palette. And definitely it will look like a combination of the two inspo palettes. Wait, what happened? Why am I so bad at math? Oh, because it's just 6 across right here. Am I going to go for a bigger? No, I'm going to edit. And I can edit myself from here because there are so many green shadows in here. And I don't think of Charlotte Tilbury Smoky Eyes Are Forever as being a particularly green palette. In fact, there is just one shade that looks like it's sort of a sage green. And then there's one that looks like it might have kind of a green flip. So I definitely don't need 4 shades. Actually, I'm not. Yeah, I think this one does too. 4 shades that have some kind of green, especially if I'm just taking it down from 4 to 2. So the question is now which 2 of these 4 belong. This is Lime Chrome from the Gold palette. I was just besmirching this shade recently in my video about why you don't need the Gold palette and why you don't have to be sad that it's been discontinued. And then that made me think that I should, try to use it more, even though I don't love it the most. As long as I have it, it is very pretty. It's just been on my mind lately. This is Clionadh Chandelier. It's just bananas. It's wild. It's one of their really, really beautiful glitter multi-chromes. This is Clionadh Ambient, it's more of a sheer shade, as you can see, more of that kind of like iridescent thing. And I just don't get as much use out of it. I really like the super flaky ones. So this might actually be a good chance to put it in this palette and get to know it a little bit better. This last shade here is Orion from Luxie, and this is actually more opaque and more bronze than I thought it was when I was just looking at the pan. They're definitely all 4 different. I do think that Orion looks a lot like some of the shades in the Charlotte Tilbury palette, and it also honestly looks a little bit more, like less special, you know what I mean? It's a beautiful shade, but it looks like less wild, which might be more in line with what one would be getting from that Charlotte Tilbury palette. Well, they're all incredible. They're all giving me feelings in my tummy. Wow, swatched Orion is really giving me Charlotte Tilbury Smoky Eyes Are Forever vibes. But which of the other 3? It's really hard to pass up Chandelier. But again, I just don't think Chandelier is as in line with the inspo. And I really am trying to be inspired by these palettes. I know myself, and I know that what I'll do is I'll put this in and then I'll just use it. And then I'll just end up with this all over my eyes all the time. And I won't really have gotten into the gig. I think that I'm going to try including this one. This one, it's that like luminous sort of pink shift that I would have gotten from Opal if I'd been able to include it. And again, it's a shade that we're strangers to each other, it's in my collection, but I just don't really know it very well or use it. I don't really know what it can do. So I'm gonna give it a chance today. Well, here's what I have to say. I could not have succeeded better at the goal. I mean, I'm looking at the pictures here and I'm looking at these shades before me, and I feel like this looks so much like a combination of those 2 palettes, like an edited down combination of the 2 palettes. But I am going to do some rearranging, and I'm going to put these guys all back where they belong. Okay, here's what I did. I basically put the retro palette inspired shades on the top and Charlotte Tilbury Smoky Eyes Are Forever inspired shades on the bottom. But there's just something that's not pleasing me about it. Like, I think I liked the way that it looked better before. So even though I feel like this is an interesting idea for the way to arrange them, I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep rearranging because I want that feeling of like my heart leaping with pleasure when I open the palette. Okay, that's better for me for some reason. I'm not exactly sure what it is. I mean, I think it does have something to do with the balance of the squares and the circles. I don't mind having them together in one palette as long as it does look sort of balanced in some way, like sort of like some kind of modern art piece made of squares and circles, you know. And I feel like before it was unbalanced. I'm going to quickly just tell you what everything is in case you missed it somewhere along the way, or in case there's something that it didn't point out, and then I'll swatch everything. So these square shades, the ones with the sharper corners, are from Adept. I think that Adept isn't making single shadows anymore. This black is the black from the Kaleidos Sci-Fi Green palette, which I think has also been discontinued. I really like the Kaleidos matte formula. This is the blackest black that I own, and I really love it. This again is Luxie Orion. This is the brown from the Natasha Denona Gold palette. And this is a Natasha Denona single that I've had for a long time. It's called Sienna. This right here is Helio. It's a shade from the Natasha Denona Lila palette that is also actually in the Natasha Denona Retro palette. So this shade is actually one of the shades from the Retro palette here in my little palette. This again is Colourpop Milli. This matte is from the Lila palette too. And this right here is Blaze from Cleona. I will link every single shadow down below in the order in which I now proceed to swatch them. Y'all, this Cleona shade that's right here on my ring finger is so interesting and weird. When you look at it in the pan, it looks like it's a very, very pale green, sea green, or at the very least, like it has green in it. Then when you swatch it out, it comes alive with this fluorescent pink flip, which I think you can see better on my finger here than you can see on my arm. And I'll tell you, it looks better in person, or at least, you know, more shiny, more luminous, like super glossy in person, even than it does on camera right here on my finger. In person, it's just completely off the rails. The swatch tells you nothing, at least the way that this swatch looks in this light right now. Maybe that's a little more of an indication, but I'm just glad that I decided to play with that shadow in the coming weeks because, again, I've had it for a long time and I just haven't really gotten to know what it can do. I'll tell you what, on my arm, it's looking very fall, isn't it? Isn't it looking like a very fall palette? And it is fall or about to be fall, so I'm not mad at that. I think it looks less inspired by Charlotte Tilbury Smoky Eyes Are Forever than I was expecting it to, now that I see it swatched out. I feel like in the pan it does, but on the arm it doesn't. And that's because there are some shades that in the pan look a little green, like this one right here, and Actually, this one right here, both of them look like they have some iridescent green. But then at least under this bright lighting, in the swatches, they kind of lose the green. So the whole arm of swatches has ended up being really dominated by these kind of like warm, these like orangey, pinky, yellowy tones. And then with the black and the brown and this cranberry, I mean, it looks like Thanksgiving dinner. But that's okay with me because I am not prone to use greens on my lids very often. And I think that if I included one that swatched more green or applied more green just for the sake of duping the vibes or for directly relating to the inspiration, then I would probably skip over it when I was using the palette. So this is fine, right? Like I know where it came from, and the most important thing going forward is that I'm going to enjoy using it. And this I'm definitely going to enjoy using. It definitely represents what is to me the best of both of these inspo palettes. And the most exciting thing to me right now is that I would never have built this by myself. If I had just sat down to build a palette that I felt like using, to pull shades that I was drawn to for whatever reason, I would never have ended up with this. I wouldn't have ended up with this cranberry shade, not in a million years. And looking at this right now, this is the one that I'm the most excited to use. Like, I'm going to be doing an eye look with this pronto. I probably wouldn't have included this orangey copper either because lately I've just been feeling like everything's copper. I'm so tired of copper. But now that I've included it and swatched it out, I can't wait to do an eye look with that either. So that's exciting. I love that it's got these rich, warm fall tones in it that's going to make me use them. And I also really like how deep it is. It's got like this really dark black, this kind of like deep winey shade, some deeper browns, even some deeper kind of gold shimmers. It feels spooky, smoky, woodsy, earthy, and yet still also colorful. And to be totally honest, I would much rather use this than either one of these two brand new palettes that are new to the market and that I'm not going to buy. I very much hope that you enjoyed watching this video. It was an absolute pleasure to film it. Again, please subscribe to my channel if you haven't, and don't forget to take extra good care of yourself today so that you can be the most effective version of yourself as you do your work in the world.